Well, hello everybody and welcome to this exciting video here on the banks of Loch Ness. And would you believe it, it's currently 20 past 10 at night. Look, absolutely bonkers. It's a good job we've got eye patches in our camper van or we wouldn't get any sleep at all, I think. But tonight I'd encourage you to come along with your chai seeds, with your jojo berries and your turmeric lattes for an exploration of the health benefits of tea. Now this is a common question I get asked about, well, is tea good for you? Is it really good for you? How good is tea for you? And I did a tea tasting at a very hippie festival 2 or 3 years ago, which was pretty surreal really, but at the end everyone wanted to know about the health benefits of tea, and I see lots of tea sellers and health food people saying that tea can do X, Y and Z, and huge unqualified promises about the health benefits of tea. And so I wanted to try and bring a bit of information, a bit of scientific research which might help you and I to understand a bit more about how tea might be good for us, but also maybe kind of where the limitations of that evidence stands. And a massive spoiler alert, I would say that there are qualified benefits to drinking tea, but probably there aren't enough of a reason to start drinking tea. You should drink tea because it's great. But if you are drinking tea, then you could feel quite reassured that there are some benefits to what you're doing. So my personal biases is obviously I love tea, and secondly I kind of do bring obviously some scientific skepticism to kind of wild claims that you might hear bandied around. Now, I am conscious that I see and know of people within the tea blogging sphere who might feel quite strongly and hold different views to my own, and that's okay. I don't want to necessarily rubbish or disrespect those people, just to offer a personal view based on some of the reading I've done on the scientific literature, and also from this really great book called Tea History, Terroirs, Varieties from the Camellia sinensis Tea House. So Camellia sinensis obviously is the tea tree, and this is a tea house who've done this really amazing tea book. I think they're based out of Vancouver or Canada. So I'm going to refer to my notes because there's quite a lot of information today, and also I should of course be drinking some tea at 10 o'clock at night. Well, I wouldn't really recommend it, but today I've been drinking, and I saved a bit for the video, really nice 2003 Silver Peacock Shu or ripe pu'er tea that's been aged in Guangdong, so it has lots of age on it from that hot humid climate. So cheers guys. I'm clearly only going to drink a sip at this time of night, as we'll be hearing later. So, it won't stand still. There we go. So that some of the caveats I would say to trying to take a scientific approach to the health benefits of tea is that scientific research is necessarily limited by trying to find out what works for the majority of people. So there will be some people for whom there'll be much more benefits from chemical A or herb B, and in the main, until you start doing kind of individual genetic type research, which is really expensive, then actually you have to work out what works for the majority of people and what doesn't seem to make any difference versus placebo or water or anything else. So that is a bit of a limitation, and I've read some people online saying how tea has transformed their health, and I say, well, good for you really. I would kind of put it in the broader context that I think there's loads of things which are really good for our health, and there's good scientific basis for those. So clearly exercise may well be the silver bullet for health. We know that sleep is totally necessary for life, and in the West we don't get enough of it. So 8 hours of good quality sleep, same time every night, is fantastic in terms of health benefits. We know that being part of a strongly knitted together social community has tremendous benefits for health and for reducing stress, for mental health, and associated with that kind of an affiliative personality, being able to manage your stress. We know have positive benefits to your mental health. Things like meditation, prayer help with that as well. We know that obviously eating well, being a healthy weight for your height, all these things clearly make a big difference to your health. And so tea is just kind of a small part of that, really, I'd say. But some of these things are interlinked. So without further ado, let's talk about what are the constituents of tea. Well, clearly the most important constituent of tea is water. And for me, I think actually this is probably the biggest health benefit to me day to day. And that is that when I'm there at work or sat at the computer or just chilling out, then I'm afraid I always want to have something in my mouth. And if that's not a cup of tea or a glass of water, then probably that's something less good for me. Maybe it's juice or Coca-Cola or a fizzy drink, or it's food, it's cakes, biscuits, just to nibble at through the day. And in the evening, maybe something alcoholic, which, in moderation is great, but obviously you can have too much of a good thing. So clearly water is actually a really good constituent of tea, and tea has no calories and no sugar, no carbohydrates, so in many ways is a fantastic healthy drink just on that alone. So what about the kind of more interesting constituents of tea? Well, clearly the more important chemicals are caffeine. There's also an amino acid unique to tea called theanine, and also there are antioxidants and catechins that you may have heard about, and in a few teas there are more interesting things like statins, naturally occurring cholesterol reducing drugs, and GABA, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain in some teas. So there can be different things, but probably the most important thing is caffeine. So let's talk about caffeine. So the British the Department of Health has decided that 400 milligrams of caffeine a day is considered quite safe. Now, just to put that into some context, a can of Coke contains 32 milligrams of caffeine, so well under a tenth of that safe level, and a cup of tea might contain typically between 20 to 50 milligrams of caffeine. So we're talking actually that the kind of safe level is really quite high. Now, there are some people who might be more sensitive, particularly to kind of anxiety provoking symptoms with tea, but also there can be what's called autonomic effects, racing fast heart rate, blood pressure going up, sweating, flushing, which can happen. And importantly, tea does reduce how sleepy you feel, and that clearly is kind of part of the main reason people take tea. And the way that works is that caffeine blocks a particular neurotransmitter called adenosine, and adenosine is found all over the body, but in particular adenosine builds up through the day in your brain and alongside your circadian rhythm, and these are two separate systems, but they do kind of work in parallel. But throughout the day, the way your nerves work and hormonal levels and cycles form your circadian rhythm, which help you to wake up and then feel sleepy later on in the day. But also, stop kidding me. I blame the fact that it's 20 past 10 and I've not been drinking tea. Adenosine builds up, and then that makes you feel more sleepy. Then through the night time when you're sleeping, actually you break down adenosine, so then you start again. But if you're not really sleeping enough, actually adenosine levels going to creep up over the days. And so caffeine blocks adenosine temporarily. Now adenosine is still rising through in your system in that time, just the effectiveness is blocked. So when actually your caffeine starts to wear off, and the half-life of caffeine is about 4 to 6 hours, there's a fact for you, 4 to 6 hours for half of the caffeine to get out of your system, and then another 4 to 6 hours for another half of that to get out of your system, and so it goes down. Then not only is all that adenosine that was already making you feel sleepy there again, but actually got an extra 4 to 6 hours of that. So then you feel really tired, and that's that come down from drinking a strong cup of tea or coffee. So by blocking the effects of adenosine, clearly it depends on the individual, on your tolerance levels, other individual factors, but in general there's good evidence that caffeine increases concentration, increases alertness levels, helps switching between tasks, helps your motor control and your reaction time. So there is good evidence that caffeine in the short term does this, and tea containing caffeine and this amino acid theanine does that most effectively in the first hour after drinking a cup of tea. So there are clearly these kind of short-term benefits, which is why so many people do reach for a cup of tea or coffee or Coca-Cola or other caffeinated drinks, chocolate as well containing caffeine, to try and give them that kind of alertness boost. Arguably, maybe getting some good quality sleep and exercising plenty are the better ways to do that, but in a fast-paced world we live in, then caffeine might be that needed boost. So that's caffeine. Now, what happens if you overdose on caffeine? Well, actually, all those effects that I mentioned already might be heightened. So you might have really fast palpitations, heartbeat. You might be sweating profusely. You might have jitters. You might feel restless. You might have really awful insomnia. You might have emotional lability, increased anxiety. So all these kind of things. And so it's thought that 4 grams, that's 4,000 milligrams of caffeine is toxic according to the FDA, but overdose effects happen after 1,000 milligrams or a gram. So that's some of the effects of caffeine. So theanine, this unique amino acid to tea, is thought alongside with the caffeine to help with alertness, but also that helps with that kind of chilled out, relaxed kind of feeling that people tend to have with a cup of tea, which may be some of the reasons why tea is often a social drink, and popping around for a cup of tea has become part of the social lexicon, is because it makes you feel chilled out and relaxed. So, but there aren't so many studies that suggest that theanine on its own helps, but with the mix of other chemicals within tea, particularly the caffeine, then there are these benefits in terms of alertness. So that moves us on to catechins. So catechins are some of these chemicals found in teas, which are thought to reduce the risk of cancer, and those are different to antioxidants, which again are thought to be generally really great for you, and so there is some evidence kind of in the long term about kind of, well, how does tea affect our risk of cancer and other long-term diseases. But in the short term there probably aren't so many effects. So let's move on to those kind of long-term benefits of tea. And I'm sorry, I think the light levels are finally going, so this first take will be the only take of this video, despite me not being able to remember adenosine, so apologies. So the long-term benefits of tea. So there are actually a lot of meta-analyses which kind of cobble together all the lots of different studies that have been done about the long-term effect of tea. Now these are mostly done in China and the Far East, and they're normally done on people who are drinking at least 3 cups of tea a day. So there is some argument about kind of, well, how generalizable would these studies be to a Western population. But nevertheless, from looking at these meta-analyses, bringing together all these studies, looking at the benefits of tea long-term, then these are some of the numbers. So there's a possibly reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. There's some suggestion that it reduces the likelihood of developing Parkinson's disease. Bigger ones, reduced risk of ischemic heart disease, coronary heart disease by some studies saying 27%, and deaths from cardiac disease by 26%. These are pretty big numbers. And reducing a risk of stroke by 21%, and overall reductions in mortality, so that's all-cause mortality, quoted as 24% in these meta-analyses. Now that's quite impressive. Now I would also suspect though that if you were to exercise regularly, sleep well, eat well, be a healthy weight for your height, probably you would see quite significant reductions in those adverse health outcomes as well. So probably not unique to tea. And it's important to say that there are no randomised controlled trials that look at these things. These are all cohort studies, retrospective studies, and we know that those are less definitive, less reliable than a randomised controlled trial. So hopefully that gives you some idea about kind of what level of evidence there is that maybe tea in the long term may offer health benefits. That is, if you drink at least 3 cups a day and you live in China or Eastern Asia, and maybe those benefits hold true for us here in the West. Hard to say 100%. Just a few other thoughts to say. About cancer and the role of catechins and antioxidants. Now, the evidence is less clear here, and there's no kind of consensus from the literature that definitively tea reduces the risk of cancer. Now, there is some evidence that tea reduces the risk of liver disease and liver cirrhosis. Now, if that's because people who are avid tea drinkers tend to be less likely to be alcoholic, I'm not really sure. And so there's some evidence that hepatocellular liver cancer, which is associated with liver cirrhosis, is less common in avid tea drinkers. But in terms of kind of the big cancers, breast cancer, lung cancer, bowel cancer, prostate cancer, there's not any definitive evidence there really. So a bit of myth busting for you. Everyone loves a bit of myth busting, and this is where this fantastic book comes in. So people often say that green teas are higher in antioxidants, particularly matcha tea. Well, actually, if you're talking about matcha tea, then you're damn right. Matcha tea is super high in antioxidants. It's also super high in caffeine. That's why everyone goes, oh, I feel so alive drinking matcha. Well, you just glugged probably the same amount of caffeine as is in 3 cups of tea. So let me pull some facts out for you. So matcha tea has 126 milligrams of caffeine in just 100 mils, the kind of classic matcha shot, compared to in some standard Assam black tea that's only down at 22 milligrams of caffeine. So that's about 6 times the amount. So whew. So yes, matcha high in caffeine, high in antioxidants, but are all green teas high in antioxidants? Well, this helpful book where they've looked at maybe 35 teas and done the same scientific tests on them, conclude that antioxidant levels in green teas, there are some green teas which have high antioxidants and catechin amounts. I'm not really sure if this is worth showing you. This is the table there showing you different catechin amounts, and matcha at the top there, but there are some green teas at the top, but then actually there's a black tea, Darjeeling, and oolong tea still in there, and there are green teas and white teas below those levels. So it's kind of it's a bit more of a complex picture than just saying that only green teas are high in antioxidants. And similarly, people often say, well, black teas are much more stimulating than white teas. White teas are very detoxy, low caffeine. Well, actually, there are some white teas, including quite a common one that are called Baimudan, which I've talked about previously, which are actually very high in caffeine, higher than many black teas. So don't be fooled by that one. And lastly, also the old teas, pu'er teas actually aren't lower in caffeine than younger teas either. So and lastly, I'd like to say a little word on qi. So lots of people who from the East who drink tea often talk about qi, the kind of energy, the life force that's within the tea. And obviously, being a Westerner, I'm a bit sceptical about that, but that probably comes as much as anything from a world view as anything else, and I can't really comment on the Taoist worldview from a scientific point of view. But what we know about these different psychoactive compounds in tea would suggest there's plenty of alternative explanations for why people feel energized in often quite different ways drinking different kinds of teas. I hope that has been a really helpful walk through some of the scientific benefits of tea, and also thinking about some of the risks. I probably should really mention, given that it's 10:30 at night that clearly drinking tea in the evenings might be bad for your sleep and therefore bad for your health too. So please drink tea responsibly. But hopefully tea as part of a balanced lifestyle could actually help us to live healthy lives. But most importantly, drink tea because it's tasty, because it's great, and it's something fun to do with friends. Well, cheers everyone, and have a good evening. Bye bye.